Hey everybody, welcome to Joe's Last Chance Garage here in San Antonio, and today I'm going to be doing a tire rotation on my Cybertruck. And if you're not familiar with my shop, I've had this open for several years now, and I've done a lot of work with restorations of Porsches of all different kinds, everything from classic 944s and 930 turbos all the way up to 997 turbos, GT3s, and almost everything in between. In addition to that, I've also done some work on Datsun 240Zs, and the one that you see here is mine. I actually built it about 30 years ago, 35 years ago to be exact, and it was a gift to my mom, and then when she passed away, it came back to me and I did a restoration of it. In addition to that, I've done restoration work on a variety of other vehicles, including this. It's a 1965 Honda S600, and if you've never heard of this one before, it's because they're extremely rare. This is the first vehicle that Honda ever built, and it's got a lot of interesting technology for that time, including 4 valves per cylinder, 600cc 4-cylinder engine with really small 150cc pistons. It also has chain-driven rear wheels, kind of like a motorcycle. So this garage and the work that I've done has really gave me a chance to be pretty familiar with vehicles, and now I'm doing work on Teslas. So let's get the Cybertruck in and put it up on the lift and get ready for the tire rotation, which is something you should be doing about every 5,000 miles. All right, now we have the Cybertruck up on my lift, and as many of you know, not everybody has a lift. I'm fortunate enough to have it in my shop here, but if you don't, make sure that you use appropriately sized jack for the weight of the vehicle, and also jack stands would be very recommended because of the weight and size of the vehicle as well. Now, there are a few things that we have to do before we can get the Cybertruck up on a lift or on jack stands to do the tire change or tire rotation, and that is to go into the screen, go to service mode, and then select jack mode. That will help prevent the suspension from moving, since it does have the air suspension while it is off the ground. And make sure you do that before you lift the Cybertruck up. Now, right now I have the Cybertruck up about a foot off the ground for a tire rotation. That's really all that I need, especially since the tires are quite heavy and large. Now, also there are 6 lug nuts, and they require a 21 millimeter socket to take off. And the torque specifications are 150 foot-pounds. So you'll need to have a torque wrench. This is an older torque wrench that I'm using just to take the lug nuts off. But you can also use a more modern one where you can set the foot-pounds. And it's easier to remove the lug nuts while the vehicle is still on the ground, especially for the front wheels, because they tend to rotate when you try to take the lug nuts off. So make sure you do that. Get them just loosened just a little bit, so it makes it easier once it's up on the lift. Now, the reason why I am doing this is that about every 5,000 miles, I recommend to my clients and also just for myself to rotate the wheels and tires. And the good thing is that on the Cybertruck, they're all the same size. So you can do a cross hatch pattern, basically taking the right rear and putting it on the left front and then doing the same thing. And that helps to even the wear across the tires over time. Also, Tesla does recommend about 5,000 miles, and if you go into the center screen under service mode, there is also a selection to reset your tire rotation, and you get a reminder at about 5,000 miles. And once you do the tire rotation, you can go back into that screen and reset that reminder so that you're ready to go in about another 5,000 miles. So let's go ahead and get a little closer in, and I'll show you removing one of the wheels. All 4 will be very similar, and like I said, I will go and rotate these in kind of a cross hatch pattern, and I'll throw up a pattern here on the screen just so you can see what I'm trying to do. Now, in traditional vehicles with a spare tire, you could rotate in the spare tire, but in this case, there is no spare tire on the Cybertruck, so I'm just doing that X pattern or cross pattern to even the wear out over the 4 tires. So let's get in a little bit closer and take a look at removing one of the wheels. Now, I've already loosened the 6 lug nuts using my 21mm socket, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of them just sort of using my hand. And I'll kind of like speed through here and kind of give you an idea of what this looks like as I remove the lug nuts. All right, so I now have all of the lug nuts removed, all 6 of them, and you can see that the tire kind of leans in at the top, and just make sure you don't let it fall off. The good thing is that there are actually wheel studs on this installation. So unlike other cars that I use and work on, particularly like Porsches and some European cars, they've gotten rid of the lug studs and they have lug bolts instead, and it's very easy for the tire to come off. So I'm really glad to see that the wheel is being held up by those wheel studs. It makes it a lot easier to take them off. Now, as I mentioned, the tire is quite heavy, so make sure that it's the car is well supported by jack stands, or in this case a lift, and you're prepared for the weight of these tires. They are quite heavy when you remove them. So anyway, right now I'll go ahead and work on all 4 of them, and I'll do the swap, and then we'll talk a little bit more as I get farther into the work. All right, I've got all 4 of the wheels and tires off of the Cybertruck. So I thought I'd take this opportunity and talk a little bit about some of the suspension on both the front and the rear while we have the Cybertruck on the lift and the wheels are off. So let's take a closer look. Okay, so as we get in closer to the front suspension, a few things that I would like to just point out, some of which we heard from Lars Moravy when he was talking to Sandy Moreau, and you may have seen some of this on Sandy Moreau. But generally, we'll start with the most obvious. Up at the top is the air strut for the air suspension, and it is quite beefy on this vehicle. Below that, this black item is the upper control arm. And I know a lot of people have talked about whether or not this is undersized for the Cybertruck. Just keep in mind that this isn't really a load-bearing part of the suspension. It's really meant to help locate and stabilize the top part of the suspension, where this wishbone for the steering knuckle is attached on the top, and this uses a kind of a ball joint that allows it to rotate while the steering is being used. And this is quite a beefy kind of a wishbone that goes down to the steering knuckle, and the steering knuckle, of course, holds the hub for the wheel, the rotor for the wheels, the caliper for the brakes, and it also mounts to the lower control arm, which is part of that the suspension that helps locate the bottom part of the suspension. Now, all of that does play a role with maintaining the stability of the vehicle, the weight of the vehicle, and the direction of the vehicle, but the bulk of the weight, the vertical forces from the suspension, go through the shock absorber system, and that is what really keeps the suspension kind of together as far as all of the bumps and the vertical motion. It also dampens out the impacts that you feel when you're going over bumps and potholes and that kind of thing. And they've obviously built the suspension with this front strut and that air shock quite beefy for the purposes of what the Cybertruck is meant for. Now, a few other things. Right over here, this is part of the steering rack. It's sort of the end of the steering rack itself. It's called a tie rod, and it connects into the front of the steering knuckle, and that is what steers the vehicle back and forth. Now, there is another interesting thing right on the front here. There's a kind of a block that has been added to the front of the steering knuckle, and Lars talked about that as far as part of the crash testing and the crash worthiness of the Cybertruck. The basic idea is that in a frontal collision, as the Cybertruck collapses in and part of the crush cans in the casting deform, this part here, basically as everything collapses, it hits the wheel, it breaks the wheel and allows that to move out of the way. So it's kind of neat, and that's why you'll see this block attached to the front of the steering knuckle on the Cybertruck. Now, one other thing that I would like to point out, and I did talk about this in my early July video right after I did the tour of the Giga Texas, and that is the front castings here on mine are kind of a gold color, and that is the original kind of the E-coating that was used on the Cybertrucks at the very beginning of the production run. But sometime in early July of 2024, they changed that to a new E-coating system that was installed at Giga Texas. And you can tell because the color of the castings and basically the body, if it's stripped off of the stainless steel, is black now and no longer the gold. So anyway, it's kind of neat to be able to see that for real here on my Cybertruck, and to confirm, yes, indeed, it is one of the early VIN numbers because of the gold color on the castings. Okay, now we're at the rear suspension of the Cybertruck, and as you can tell, it's significantly different than the front. And part of that is that a lot of the weight and the motion of steering of vehicles is transferred to the front suspension, and it takes a lot more loading than the rear, but it does that in a different way. And with the Cybertruck, we also have another one of these steering arms and the tie rod, and this is the part here that steers the rear wheels. And there's another steering rack mounted up underneath the bed of the vehicle. And actually, if we look in here, we can see some of the orange high tension wires that are part of the drive motor right in that same area. Now, with the ability to steer the wheels on the back, that adds a little bit more of a kind of a engineering challenge to the geometry of the rear wheels. So not only do they have the traditional setup to support the load of the bed and whatever we put in it and the truck itself, but it also has to have movable joints to allow the steering knuckle here in the back to be able to turn also. Now we also can see here this very large air strut. It's another one of the parts of the air suspension system, and this is what allows the Cybertruck to be able to raise and lower its height, and also helps with the kind of the suspension travel and the smoothness while you're driving on the road. And in addition to that, we can see parts of the casting up here. And again, it's that characteristic gold color of the early Cybertrucks. If you have a later Cybertruck and you were to take the wheel off and look up there, you'll see that it's black. And that again happened sometime around July, VIN numbers somewhere around 20,000. So anyway, just a quick view here of the rear suspension of the Cybertruck. One other thing that I'll point out is it has the rear control arm. It's kind of like a wishbone, and it's attached directly to the casting on the bottom of the vehicle. And of course, you have the upper control arm here as well. And this helps to locate the rear suspension, have the proper geometry for the wheels. And in addition to that, the steering knuckle has those ball joints that allows it to rotate with that rear steering. So pretty cool to be able to see this part of the Cybertruck and how it looks with the wheels off. So I'm in the middle of doing the tire rotation, and I thought I would just give you kind of a sense of scale about just how large these tires and wheels are. Now the wheels themselves are the 20 inches in diameter, and the tires themselves are 285 and they're 20, and the aspect ratio is 65. So that means it's 65% from bead to tread as the width of the actual tread itself. So they're pretty beefy vehicle tires, or tires for and wheels for the Cybertruck. They're also quite heavy. They're one of the heaviest wheel tire combinations that I've had on any of my vehicles. But good thing is that the tread wear on all four appears to be quite good, very even, and I don't see any of the characteristic inside of the wheel because of the camber of the suspension wear that I've seen on other vehicles, including my Model S and my Model 3. So at least for right now, the tire wear looks pretty good after about 5,500 miles of driving. And by doing the wheel and tire rotation like I'm doing at about every 5,000 miles, that should increase the lifespan of the tires significantly. And at least for right now, with the wear that I'm seeing and looking at the tread wear indicators, these have a lot of miles yet to go. All right, so I'm ready to start putting the wheels and tires back on. Again, this is where the lug nuts and the lug bolts come into handy, because it helps to place the wheels back on without them falling off or having to have a special tool. So basically, just make sure that you're well balanced, because these are quite heavy, and we'll put them back on. Like I said, they are quite heavy, so make sure that if you have a second person, that could help you with getting these positioned. But as you can tell, the wheel studs are holding the tire up, which is outstanding. And what I'm going to do now is just use the fact that it's hanging here, and I'm just going to hand tighten on the lug nuts onto the lug bolts or the lug studs. And all I need to do is just get them hand tight for right now. We'll worry about torquing them down later. Also know that these wheels are something called hub-centric, which means that they have kind of a groove milled into the back of the tire or the wheel. And there's a corresponding groove on the rotor and the hub in the middle. And you need to place that on top, and that helps keep the wheel centered. Okay, for now that's just hand tight, and I'll do the same for all the rest of the wheel tire combination, and then I'll get ready to do the torquing. We'll do the initial torquing while it's off the ground, but I'll do the final when it is on the ground. And that'll take allow the ground and the weight of the vehicle to keep the tires from moving, so I can get that proper torque. All right, well, I've got all of the wheels and tires back on after doing the rotation. I've torqued them down to 151 foot-pounds of torque on each of the lug nuts per specifications, and of course it's back on the ground. Now there's a few other things that we need to take care of before I'll be moving this off of the lift, and that has to do with resetting the tire indicator, the wear indicator, and also removing it from jack mode. So let's take a look at doing that right now. Okay, so we're back into the Cybertruck, and we're going to reset both the tire monitor and also remove it out of jack mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into the service mode, and on the top right we see tire service mileage, and it says approximately 5,000 miles ago. So I'm going to hit reset, and it says reset mileage since last tire service after each rotation, or replacement or swap, plus brake pedal with key present to reset. So I've got the brake pedal on, I've got my phone, so I'm going to go ahead and put a reset, and then as you can see, it has reset it from the 5,000 to less than 5,000 miles ago. And then the other thing that I want to reset is in the same screen, take it out of jack mode, and that allows me to be able to move the vehicle safely now that I've got it off the jack stand. So if you're going to do this work, make sure that you remember that there is jack mode. Use that before you lift the vehicle, and then when you're done, take that back out. So that's how you do a tire rotation on a Cybertruck. Now, of course, I have a lift. It makes it a little easier, but you can use a jack and jack stands if you use the right locations on the battery as indicated, like we talked about. Take your time, make sure that it is well supported. Follow the instructions on the screen to put it into jack mode, and then of course reset the trip meter for the tire wear on the service screen as well. So it's pretty straightforward. I would recommend, if you're going to do this, have a helper. The tires and wheels were quite heavy, And for what I work on here and the vehicles that I normally work on, these are about twice as heavy. So make sure you keep that in mind. Otherwise, I hope that you found this interesting and informative. And I hope that either you have a Cybertruck now and you'll be able to use this to do your tire rotation, or soon you'll be able to have a Cybertruck and then you'll be able to do it. Either way, the Cybertruck's pretty easy to work on and a lot of fun to have as well. So let's get it out of the garage, and we'll call this a wrap for this episode. Thank you very much for watching.